Grizz Nation, the Grizzlies are back home. They're taking on the Brooklyn Nets today. Joining me is Alex Schiffer. He is gonna try and represent the Nets here, but I am going hard for the Grizzlies today, so I hope you're ready.
I'll do my best.
All right, the Grizzlies are 2-1 right now. The Nets are 1-1. The Grizzlies are back home after a loss that we don't need to talk about anymore. The Brooklyn Nets, though, they had a loss in their first game and then had a squeaker against Toronto. This will be their first away game, taking on the Grizzlies. And I read somewhere, not that I'm trying to jinx anything, but I read somewhere that since Ja has been drafted by the Grizzlies, the Nets have gone 0-6 versus the Grizzlies. And so I think that's such an interesting stat. Dylan Brooks still questionable. Joe Harris is back for the Brooklyn Nets. Seth Curry, of course, still out. I'm going to start the same way I started my last one when we were playing the Mavs. Alex, if Dylan is or is not out, how do you think that affects the way that Brooklyn comes into this game on the offensive end? Because he really is the defensive stopper.
Yeah, quick also addition to the injury report. Markieff Morris is a late scratch for the Nets due to personal reasons. So curious to see what they do. He's been like a backup power forward / small ball center. But to the Dylan Brooks point, yeah, it's going to be interesting because, you know, the Nets have, I mean, three guys, obviously. You could two and Kevin and Kyrie can get their own basket, and a third and Ben, who, you know, creates for everybody. So it'll be interesting to kind of see, is there a guy they pick on with him out of the lineup? You know, obviously whoever, you know, I think Dylan's one of the best defenders in the NBA. You know, whoever replaces him, there's probably a bit of a drop off. So who do they pick on? You know, do they take advantage of that matchup, or do they still, you know, they're still just trying to get a cohesion on offense? Are they more interested in just getting their sets down and developing a chemistry? So whether or not he's out there, I'm going to be curious to see how much of an impact that does have on the game plan, because they're still such a new team. Are they at a stage where they want to just pick on certain matchups and search for mismatches, or are they still just trying to see who they are and create an identity too?
Yeah. And then, okay, so let's say that Dylan is in. My assumption would be he would be on KD. So that leaves Ben Simmons, that leaves Kyrie. And Kyrie he's kind of had his first like good game. Ben's played his first like real game in 16 months. These two guys, I saw Kyrie hitting some tough threes in the last one. Like these guys, you feel like they're back in it now, those two?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I thought their first two games, you know, that Pelicans game, they were completely out to lunch. And then Friday kind of showed you what they could be, as you said. I mean, they were shaky. You know, Royce O'Neal had that game sealing three. Kyrie, as you said, he had a couple tough shots that if they don't go, we might be talking about an 0-2 team. So I think that, you know, you talk about those two guys and their layoffs, but also Joe Harris has played his first game Friday in 11 months. You know, Seth Curry, as you said, is out, but they still have a lot of guys that are coming back from long layoffs. So I really think that while there seems to be some cohesion and while they seem to be getting back into a groove, you know, it wouldn't stun me if we see a rusty Ben Simmons tonight, just because, you know, he was gone for so long, and same thing with Joe Harris. And I'll be kind of curious to see too, you know, how the Grizzlies attack them, given some of that. I mean, obviously Ben's a great defender, but Joe is still getting his footing back after 2 ankle surgeries. So I think that they're getting into a groove, but I think they still have plenty of work to go.
Yeah, agreed. And look, you guys, you're talking defense now. Let's talk the Grizzlies offense. John Morant's third in the league in scoring. This is gonna be a two-part question for you. Who's stopping him? If you think it's Ben, do you think Ja has a problem with Ben's length? And then number two, Desmond is someone who should be the second leading scorer for the Grizzlies right now. He's shooting 28% over the last 3 games from the three. Hopefully this is kind of a bounce back game. Hopefully he snaps out of that like minor slump. It's been 3 games, so I'm not trying to be dramatic, but who takes that responsibility then if Des starts to find his shot?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you know, Ja and Ben, as you said, I mean, there's such a height difference there, and Ja's so quick and shifty. I could see Ben having a good performance against him, but, you know, Ja, I'm a huge Ja fan. It would not stun me if he gave him some problems. So who's their second defender? You know, Royce O'Neal has been a good defensive piece for them. I mean, you see some of the passing lanes he's got into and some of the steals he's had. He's been almost like the Nets free safety, because there's been a couple of, you know, full court passes the Pelicans made against them where he ran it all the way down, was the last line of defense and prevented, you know, a couple of easy points. So he's somebody I'm going to be curious to see who they put on. As you said, I mean, do they put him on Bane, where I think that wouldn't be a bad matchup and there's similar size advantages there, or would they put someone like Ben, given the length he can have on a closeout from 3 on Bane, and maybe use Royce on Ja because it's a bit less of a height difference and maybe a better matchup there. So I think you're going to see some combination of Ben and Royce on those two guys, but who it is and how switch heavy are they and how much do they try to stay through the screens is going to be interesting too on that front.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we could go through every matchup. I mean, Steven Adams, a vet in this league, is going to be up against maybe Claxton, but I don't want to go through everything. I have a quick look. Steve Nash called your last win, or the Nets' last win, a character win, right? Versus the Raptors. He's got a 9-man rotation. The Grizzlies, however, their bench is averaging like almost close to 40 points a game in the first 3. The Nets bench has scored 52 points total this season so far. What do you feel about the depth? Like when you do get to these second units, in my opinion, the Grizzlies have the upper hand there.
Yeah, no, I think the Grizzlies, I forget the stat from last year. You'd probably have it on top of your head, but what the Grizzlies were without Ja last year was like 18-2 or something, like something stupid.
Yeah, I think it was like 20-2 or 20-2.
Yeah, like I think the Grizzlies were like, you heard Kevin Durant say one of his trade request reasons was because how the Nets, whenever he wasn't healthy, he he felt like they should be more competitive without him, and his health didn't hinge on all that. And, Steve Nash was quick to point out that, we weren't just without Kevin, though. We would be part-time Kyrie, no Joe Harris, Ben, we'd be without our top 4 guys. I think the Grizzlies are a good example of what Kevin was alluding to, where like they were without their best guy and they can weather it very well. And, we'll still see what Joe Harris can be like. Markieff Morris being out's another interesting thing. I mean, you talk about the Nets' depth, that first preseason game, or the second one, when they were without Seth Curry, Joe Harris, TJ Warren, a bunch of these guys, their 3-point shooting, aside from Kevin and Kyrie, is Royce O'Neal and Patty Mills. And then after that, you're looking at Cam Thomas and some guys that are more hot and cold. So I think tonight's another good example. They still don't have Seth Curry, and Joe Harris still getting his feet back under him. If the threes aren't falling for Kevin, and, Kevin missed, I think, his first 6 shots against the Raptors before heating up. So if the shots aren't falling for those guys, where does the scoring come from? And Markieff is an interesting one to me too, because, he's more of that big body physical guy they don't have a lot of. You talk about, I think a big matchup is Steven Adams versus the Nets bigs, because they're pretty thin at center, both physically and depth wise. And he's an animal down there. So I'm really curious to kind of see, with no Markieff Morris, like who gets those minutes and how effective are they, especially against a big guy like Steven Adams, because, after Markieff, in terms of girth, you kind of lose something on the Nets bench. I mean, Yuta Watanabe doesn't have the muscle that Markieff has. So I like the Grizzlies' depth a lot there, and that's why I'm curious to see if it becomes an issue for the Nets tonight.
Yeah, and just to follow up on your bigs discussion, in terms of rebounding, because obviously bigs do a lot of that. The Grizzlies are 7th in the league right now. The Nets are 23rd. So if you are watching from home and you're like, "Ooh, I hope Steven Adams has a good game," I would say that he's going to have a really good rebounding game. But just a stat to think about. The game, Alex.
Sure.
Yeah, the game tips off at 7:00 here in Memphis at Central Time. You can watch it on Bally Sports and the Bally Sports Plus app. And I think the one thing, this is what I always say when we have like big stars coming to town, the one thing that I think you and I can both agree on is that there is some superstars about to play here in Memphis, and it's going to be really fun tonight.
Yes, I also am looking forward. Nick Claxton was John Morant's AAU teammate. I believe I dropped this last time on the show. They're very good friends. They've barely been able to play against each other. I'll be curious to see if there's any friendly trash talking or a clapback or two. Their families are still tight too. So that matchup has never really happened yet. But I hope we see some of it tonight.